What's up, Ragin Nation? How's it going? This is Alex here, and you're watching a Ragin Ronin review. I got a review for you. I saw the Cloverfield Paradox. It's the third film in this Cloverfield franchise or cinematic universe that was executive produced by J.J. Abrams. The first one came out in 2007, and that was directed by Matt Reeves. And then the second one, 10 Cloverfield Lane, came out in 2016, which was directed by Dan Trachtenberg. And now we have the Cloverfield Paradox, which is directed by Julius Onah, and this is the third film in this really mysterious cinematic universe. And that's how I feel about the first two films. They're mysterious, they're intriguing, and definitely films that were really interesting. They both had really interesting concepts. So I really liked those two films. I enjoyed them both a lot. I was very engaged by them. So I was expecting the same kind of I guess experience when watching the Cloverfield Paradox, which was originally tentatively titled The God Particle, and they didn't have a release date for that. They kept on moving and shifting it around, and then in a surprise announcement yesterday, during Super Bowl, they announced that it was coming out on Netflix right after Super Bowl. And that was a big surprise, because after Super Bowl, I watched Cloverfield Paradox on Netflix, and I went in with some pretty I guess certain expectations. I learned that the film is definitely a film in the same universe, of course, but it's more like an origin story, because actually it explains how all this mystery and all this stuff with whatever happens in the events of the first two films, how it all happened and why it happened. So I think it's good that they made a film like this to explain the origins of all this mystery that went down on Earth. And that is because in this future, I forget how, I think it's 2028 or something like that, you have these characters played by Gugu Mbatha-Raw, David Oyelowo, Daniel Bruhl, John Ortiz, Chris O'Dowd, Axel Henny, and Zhang Ziyi, and Elizabeth Debicki. They're part of this space program that's been going on for like a bit over 2 years, and they're trying to find like a brand new source of energy, or create a new source of energy, because energy is running out on Earth, so they need to venture out to outer space in a ship called the Shepherd, where they're going to recreate or create this kind of energy source. By doing that, they actually did something which opened up like a portal to another dimension, and all this stuff happens. Okay, so that's the general synopsis of this film, and that's all you really need to know going into this. Sounds pretty interesting, but as I was watching this film, I gotta tell you that this just reminded me so much of another film that came out in 1997 called Event Horizon. Now, Event Horizon was not a good film at all, but it became a cult classic. Like, people really appreciated it much after it came out on home video release. And I've only seen it once in the theaters and again on home video release, but it was definitely a film that I felt really like, I kind of like not really redefined sci-fi terror or sci-fi horror, but it really was a film that stood out in that genre. This film, 10 Cloverfield, or rather a Cloverfield Paradox, seems to be an underwhelming ripoff of Event Horizon. Like, Event Horizon was a very brutal, gory, like really scary, terrifying, like horrifying movie. This feels like a watered down version of that, because it has the exact same concepts. All of these terrible things happen on this ship, and it kills the crew members one by one. It's got elements from Event Horizon, elements from Aliens, elements from Prometheus, like 2001: A Space Odyssey, like, you know, all these kind of sci-fi films that that came out in the past. This film actually borrows a lot of elements in that, so therefore it just makes it feel like a very like, it feels very unoriginal. It feels like a big ripoff. But I'm thinking, like, what else can they do, really? I mean, this film, it really has a generic synopsis, but then I don't know what they can do creatively that can make it that much more interesting. So that's the biggest problem in this film, and really makes this film really feel like a big mess. Because at the end of the day, what you're watching is crew members getting killed off one by one in very random ways. It almost felt like the writers spent the most amount of time trying to figure out how they should kill off the crew members. And basically you're left wondering, are bad things going to happen to these crew members? And of course they do. And if you're thinking if something's going to happen to another crew member, something does happen. It's like just things happening in the most bizarre ways, and it really leaves no real explanation. I don't know if it really explains anything except for the fact that the events of what happens in the Cloverfield Paradox leads up to the events of the other films. So I gotta say that if you are not a fan of the first two films, then you're really not going to enjoy this film. You're just going to think that this is a very, very generic sci-fi thriller, which it is. Now, if you are a fan of the first two films, then you will be slightly more engaged, just because you understand the context of what is going on in this film. But besides that, you're going to feel like this is a very sloppily, very lazily written sci-fi thriller. And that's all it is. As a standalone movie, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It's just a bunch of random stuff happening to like random people in terrible ways. And that's really it. But at least I enjoyed the first two films, so I was able to sit through the Cloverfield Paradox. And I just feel it's a bit of a waste, because you have this great concept, and this is the third film in this three-film franchise, which essentially makes it the third film in a trilogy. And this is just a really weak way to really round out this trilogy, unfortunately. So I'm gonna say that I'm gonna give the Cloverfield Paradox 4.5 out of 10. 4.5 out of 10. I mean, like, I was entertained, but in no way did I feel like this was actually something that got me really, really engaged, because I really wasn't. I was just watching stuff happen, watching terrible stuff happen to random characters. That's all it really was. So anyways, it's on Netflix, so go check it out when you have a moment. I have 2 hours to spare. I think it's worth a look, especially if you watch the first two Cloverfield films, which by the way are both on Netflix as well, so you can do a marathon and see how you feel about all that. But I'll say that 10 Cloverfield Lane is definitely the strongest out of the three films, with this one being the weakest. And there you have it, 4.5 out of 10. That's all I gotta say in this review. As always, if you enjoyed this review, you want to see more, hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, like me on Facebook, The Ragin Nation, also follow me on Twitter, Ragin Nation. My name is Alex. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Peace.